Let me show you how to make the perfect frijoles refritos. Hello everybody and welcome back to my kitchen. The next page in our taco manual takes us to what I consider to be the most important accompaniment to go with all these beautiful tacos that you guys are making out there. So let's talk about frijoles refritos. Fried beans, well-fried beans, or what a lot of people call them refried beans. There's nothing re about them. Re is a prefix in Spanish that just means done really well. So that's why I often call them well-fried beans. First, we got to talk about beans and how you cook them or what you buy. So let's talk first about how you cook them. Here, I've got 1 pound of small black beans. That's a generous 2 cups. Sometimes if they're bigger beans, it'll be like 2.5 cups if you're using pintos or some of the red beans or something like that. But you can use any kind of bean that appeals to you. I love black beans, so that's what I'm doing here today. Okay, so the first thing you do is rinse them off and you pick over them for some rocks. Most of the beans that we get today are very clean, so you're probably not going to find any of that debris in the beans. And then you cook them in one of basically 2 ways. You're going to be on the stove top, or you're going to be in a pressure cooker. So for 1 pound of beans, you're going to put 2.5 cups of liquid. If you're cooking it on the stove top, if you're doing it in my handy dandy Instant Pot pressure cooker here, you're going to put 2 quarts of water, just a half a quart less, because there's no evaporation there. And then you're going to bring everything to a simmer, and you're going to simmer or pressure cook 1 hour in the pressure cooker, 2 hours more or less on the stove top. Very low heat, barely a simmer to let these guys go. Should you soak your beans overnight? Man, that's up to you. They don't do it in Mexico. You don't have to do it. They will cook quicker. And a lot of times people will say that if you pour off the liquid and start with new liquid after soaking them overnight, they'll be more digestible. Truth of the matter is, beans will be more digestible if you eat more beans. Plain and simple, okay? People don't talk about digestibility in countries where they eat a lot of beans, but we don't eat them much in the United States, so we have to deal with that issue. Okay, so now we've got our finished beans here. If you're doing it in the pressure cooker, then just let it go off and naturally reduce that steam over the next 20 minutes or so, but don't do a very quick release of the steam. Okay, we've got our cooked beans here on stovetop. Oh, I put this clay one over here because someone gave me that as a beautiful piece, a very traditional stovetop bean pot. There are many different styles of these all over Mexico, and maybe you travel to Mexico, you go to a market, you see one, and you want to bring that back. They will impart a really beautiful earthiness to the flavor of the beans. Okay, now we need to look here and see what the consistency of these beans is here. So we've just got enough of the juice to just barely cover them. That's where we want to start. You will have about 6 cups of beans here, something, let's say about 7 cups of beans. So this is the point at which we have to stop and say, okay, I'm never going to be doing my beans from scratch, so talk to me about what I can buy in a can, because canned beans are perfectly fine. So they are coming now in cans as well as pouches, usually 15 ounces in each one of those, and they won't have as much juice as this, but for this recipe to equal about a pound of beans, the pound of dry beans that we started with, you'll need about 3 cans or 3 pouches. You could go 3.5, 4 if you wanted to for this same recipe that I'm making now, but I'm basically basing it on a 1 pound of dried beans recipe here. Okay, next thing that I have to do. I've cooked these without any salt. Most people will tell you to do that, but there are people who will definitely say that's not the way to go. Put the salt in from the very beginning. You'll have to decide. I'm kind of split on it. I've done it both ways, and I can't tell a lot of difference. But these don't have any salt in them, so I'm putting 2 heaping teaspoons of this flake salt in there. I'm going to let that cook in with them because it takes a little while for the beans to absorb that salt. I'm going to let that cook while I do my prep for the next stage for making the frijoles refritos. I'm going to chop up this onion and I'm going to dice I'm going to very finely mince the garlic for this recipe. Okay, all of these vegetables are prepped now, and now's the moment that we talk about fat. So you can use anything that you want, fat-wise, to make your frijoles refritos, anything from vegetable oil that'll give it a neutral kind of flavor, to the fresh rendered pork lard. I'm going to encourage you not to buy the hydrogenated stuff that you find on the grocery store shelves. It doesn't have, it's harmful to you, but it also doesn't have any flavor. So fresh rendered pork lard, or what I'm going to be using today, which is really my absolute favorite here, and that is bacon drippings, the fat from cooking bacon. Now, the quantity that you're going to use here is about 1/4 of a cup. That's what you're looking for. But I will say that there's a lot of controversy as to how fatty these should be. In some places in Mexico, they like lots of fat in them. In other places, they like them to be a little bit leaner and soupier. So you're going to have to figure out your way through all of this. I've got this now over about a medium-high heat just to start here. And then I'm going to add all of the chopped onion. We're going to cook that until it completely softens and starts to brown. Browning to me is key here for developing flavor. And then we'll add our garlic for a minute or so and start to add the beans to it. Okay, we are ready to start now adding the beans to this. I'm going to turn that fire off completely and then bring the beans a little closer here. And with a slotted spoon, start to add them to this pan. I'm doing it with a slotted spoon, so I'm not getting any of the juice right now. I will add that a little bit later. But I'm going to use the old-fashioned potato masher to do my mashing. I will tell you that it works really beautifully if you live near a Mexican grocery store or travel to Mexico a lot. Then you can buy the bean masher in those places. But this old-fashioned potato masher works just as good. And now you have to make the decision as to what you're going to do for consistency here. If you were in Oaxaca, you would have put these beans straight into a blender jar and made a pasta, as they would call it, out of it, a paste out of it. I like the frijoles refritos to have some texture, so I don't really work them in here. And you'll notice that I like a lot of onions and garlic in the frijoles refritos. You could do less if that suits your taste. Okay, now we've got these all nicely mixed in here. So now I'm going to put the rest of the beans in. I usually do it in a couple, 3 different additions, just so that I get started with the beans. Now, of course, if it's easier for you to pour these beans into a colander set over a bowl, then you've got your finished beans without the liquid then. But I think I've got just about where I want there. And just a little bit more time mashing, and we're going to be done. Now, you may think that this is a lot of frijoles refritos, and I would agree with you. But they freeze beautifully. I don't usually make anything less than a whole pound of dried beans at a time. But of course, you could scale this recipe down if you want to. They freeze beautifully. They're great to have in the refrigerator for a week or so. One of my favorite, I'm going to call it light meals / snacks, is to heat a tortilla up, smear it with black beans, put queso fresco over it, and a little salsa. It's just, or even Mexican hot sauce. It's just so good. And it's so good for you as well. So I'm getting to the point where I like the texture. You'll notice that you'll see whole beans still in here, a few whole beans in here. But I really like this kind of a texture for it. Now, one thing that you have to know, well, a couple things you might have to know. Number one is, when I was cooking these beans, you saw that I had it partially covered. If you don't have it covered, then the liquid will evaporate too fast. Always check every 15-20 minutes or so while you're boiling beans, or simmering beans, I should say, that the liquid is still above the level of the beans. And if you see beans peeking up, add a little bit more hot water to it so it comes right back to a simmer. And now that I've got these cooked to this stage, they're perfect to smear on a taco before you put your filling on there. But I will tell you, these will thicken up super fast. So you want your beans to be runnier, juicier. So I'm going to pour actually all this juice, because I only have like about a cupful in there. I'm going to put that all in there and stir it in. It'll loosen them up really fast. But then I can let this simmer for a little bit more, or as they cool a little bit, I can just wait for them to naturally thicken. Okay, let's put that over there. Towel down there. I'm going to move these beans over in front of you here, and I will tell you, that's the way I like to serve them when I'm serving tacos. I leave them in the skillet that I cooked them in. This is a beautiful cast iron skillet. This one has the added advantage that I can put this top on it like that and keep them warm for quite a long time, because cast iron holds heat really beautifully. And then when it comes time to serve, I can either return them to the heat and give them a little boost there, or I can, if they're still warm, just uncover them and let everybody help themselves. I hope this helps you when you're planning to serve tacos, to know a few things about serving frijoles refritos with them, because it's an absolute magical accompaniment.